understand that my attire might not be particularly fit for the environment that I'm in, but one must do their best with the cards that they are dealt. So I have an interesting story to share with you all this afternoon, and I thought that this would be a lovely place to do that. Please forgive, again, the attire, trudging through a floodplain with loafers. It's a hawk of some sort. And without the microphone, I apologize, so I'll do my best to project my voice, but this morning I woke up to a text from the homie about a homie's mother who had passed away, and that their funeral procession was occurring at that very moment. So I did my best to get dressed and head to the particular place. But this is a story about death, and this won't be the last time that I tell this story. There are many facets to this narrative that I'd like to share, and this is sort of an impromptu doing, but I wanted to do this at this time on this date to honor a particular number of things. So anyways, slightly after I was born, I lived in Wisconsin for a short period of time, just across the border between Illinois and Wisconsin. And from what I remember, my mother in particular wanted to move us back to where I grew up because she didn't like the fact that there was well water where we lived in Wisconsin, and there was a lack of extracurricular activities. So that was a big one, the extracurriculars. We returned to Illinois. We purchased a home in the suburbs. Not we, my parents. And we did I did what many kids did at the time, which was go outside of the house, play on the street, play in the neighborhood, play at the park, meet the other people that are around, do that sort of thing, and befriend whoever was there. And one of the people that I met and seemed to have a very cohesive relationship with and get along with and vibe with was an individual named Zachary Tran. And he was a G. I loved him as young. I might have been 4 or maybe just barely 5 years old when I first met him. He was a good kid. He lived just down the street from me, around the corner, maybe 5-10 houses away. It's a challenging thing. I'll come back and I'll share all the particular memories and stuff, but I used to go over to his house. I remember he had a ton of toys. He had these Connects race cars that would, you drop a car and it would slide down and do loop-de-loops and shoot off, or in particular, he had Beyblades. I remember I never had Beyblade brand Beyblades, but he had the Beyblade brand Beyblades as well as the battle arena. So I used to go over to his house and he taught me 1, 2, 3, let them rip. And you would rip these Beyblades, and they were just fancy tops that would battle one another, and that was a ton of fun. And I remember he had a birthday party that was paleontologist themed, that had the first ever bouncy house that I had been on, and he had a tree in the southern corner of his house that we climbed on, and a ton of festivities, and it was a beautiful thing. But one of the things that him, myself, and several other kids in the neighborhood, but one other kid basically on the block, were involved in was GLSA, Greater Libertyville Soccer Association. We all played soccer as young kids, and that was a lot of fun. Not that any of us were good at soccer, but it's just what young kids did in the area. And that particular day, so we all lived on the same block, myself, him, and another friend. We would carpool. I guess I don't have quite a recollection, but one day a certain person's parents would pick up all 3 of us, the other day would be the second, and the other day would be the third. And on that particular day, it was Zach's mother's turn to pick up him, myself, and our other friend and take us to soccer practice, which was at a close by field. And Zach, in particular, was at the local park district doing something with rocket science. I don't quite remember, but I remember that he was building rockets with like baking soda and vinegar or something. I don't quite remember, but I remember she picked up myself and the friend, and then we drove to the park district to pick up Zach. And then from there, it was a quick little hop over to the soccer field where we began practice. And this particular day, so this is north, we were facing the south with a soccer goal behind our backs, and everybody was, 10 or 20 yards in front of us. And for the warm-up for soccer practice that day, which happened every day, they would kick balls into the goal to try to make, shots before practice started or whatever, however it was. And myself and Zach were the goalies for this afternoon. And I was on the left, or relative, the western side of the goal. Zach was on the eastern side of the goal. And everybody was in front of us. They were kicking the balls towards us. And it was a particularly windy day from the west towards the east, and very, very windy. So anyone who kicked a ball, it tended to blow, be carried by the wind and blow before even getting close to the goal over to another area that had 3 pine trees set up. And so every so often, basically everybody's ball who was kicking balls at the goal would get swept over towards those pine trees and needed to be collected. And this was a role that was adopted by our coaches. I think we had 2 male coaches at the time, and systematically they would go over, they would collect the balls, they would bring them all back or kick them all back, and then we would continue that particular, it's a beautiful hawk carrying itself on the wind. We had 2 coaches that would systematically send the balls back, and we were able to continue practice. And like I mentioned, that day was particularly windy, and that wind brought misfortune, unfortunately. I remember just prior to the incident, Zachary's mother, our third friend that was with us, he had to use the bathroom, and there was a local park district bathroom further into the park, and we were young, 5, 6 years old, so he needed an escort. Zachary's mother volunteered. She grabbed him, she brought him over, she took him to the bathroom. And it was when she was at the bathroom that the incident occurred. So as far as I remember, I was standing where I was, probably centered a little bit off to the left of the goal and a little bit forward. And Zach himself, he was, as circumstances would happen, was not centered to the goal. He was a little bit over to the right and closer to the actual goal. And if you know a soccer goal, they are 2 L's connected at the top, horizontal, and 2 vertical posts. And damn, I don't remember a lot, but I remember being ready to receive a goal, like I was ready to block it, like I was the goalie. And something happened that just landed me flat on my face. And if you've ever, been in a moment of shock or experienced a severe injury or something, you might have had adrenaline go through your body and not experience the pain in the moment, but to have it come later. And so, as far as I remember, I was put flat on my face, and I remember feeling fear, right? Maya Angelou says, you won't remember what somebody says to you, you will remember how they made you feel. But emotions are very human, and they are persistent in terms of our memory. It's kind of how we compress memories so that we can have a lot of them over a long period of time. And so fear was the emotion that I had. But I remember being put flat on my face, and I remember not being able to get up. I was pinned, and that was the first time that I had ever been held down by anyone or anything in my life. And there was a loud metallic clank that was associated with this feeling. And I don't know how long it was from the incident of the goal falling, but when the goal fell, the 2 male soccer coaches had been retrieving balls from those 3 pine trees, or whatever kind of trees they were, the prickly needles and whatnot. And they were over there, so probably as soon as it fell, they came running over. I remember watching the men kind of like put the hands over one another to get the posts up to lift the goal up. And I was laying down flat on my stomach, and I was able to roll over, but I wasn't able to move my legs. I was scared. I didn't know what paralysis was, but I thought that I was paralyzed. I couldn't move my legs. I was just able to sort of flop over onto my butt and then sort of sit up a little bit. And the 2 men that were responsible for us, the coaches, they had identified me, and they were looking for everybody. They couldn't find Zach. And so they sort of asked me, I remember, where was Zach? And at that point, I wasn't expressive verbally. So I was flat down, I had rolled over, they were asking me where Zach was. And all I was able to do was point to the general space where he had been. I also did not see where he was. I hadn't established visual contact. And I remember from my butt looking, sorry, it was actually this way, but I'm doing it relative to this tree. Sorry, I'm doing it relative to this tree. I don't want to project my voice in the wrong direction. I forgot I don't have a lapel mic. But Zach was over this way towards the western post of the goal, and I pointed in that direction. I remember sitting on my butt, and I remember watching the guys kind of go over and find where Zach was and sort of grab him, and it almost seemed like they pulled him out of the ground, like he had been compressed into the ground. And they lifted him up, and I don't remember quite much else about the men's response, but I remember at that very moment, it seemed like the moment that they had pulled Zach out of the ground, the mother had returned from taking our friend to the bathroom. And I, as long as I live, I will never forget her facial expression when she saw her son in that moment. If you've ever seen a woman express, this isn't the emotion that she was feeling, but like excitement, the hunching of the spine, the opening of the mouth to scream, and sort of the frantic raising of the feet, kind of like you're chopping your feet in football, and the shaking of the hands. That's excitement, but what she was experiencing was fear, and I can only imagine, but something, bro. She was terrified, right? In that very moment, a parent doesn't know what to do. All a parent wants to do is ensure the safety of their children. And she saw that her child had been compromised in some capacity. She didn't really know what it was, but I remember her chopping her feet and raising her hands and her mouth open and oh my God, expressing that emotion. And after that, everybody panicked, right? They had seen the severity of the impact, and I'll get more into it, but I know that everybody dispersed, right? I was left there with Zach. I don't know how it happened. Maybe they brought him over to me. Maybe I was able to scoop myself over to him. But I remember if the goal was this way, I ended up having his head this way. So he must have been moved from here to here, facing the western direction. That's a beautiful crane. Or a heron. I don't quite know birds quite well. But he was facing this direction, and he was on his back. And I was somehow over the top of him. I didn't have the use of my legs, but I was able to prop myself up on my hip and look over him. And like I said, I wasn't verbal. I wasn't expressing anything with my voice. But I was observing him in that state. And so the way that it happened, the soccer goal was like this. When it fell down, the horizontal portion, which is my thumbs, that hit me. It struck me probably in my mid-back and pinned me against the ground, which, might have caused some kind of damage or something, I don't quite know. But unfortunately, the vertical post, which is represented by my right hand to you, the left, my fingers, Zach was standing right in front of this. And so the vertical posts fell, and the entirety of the goal would have crushed him from toe to head. Toe first, head last. And I remember when I was hunched over him, facing the east direction, I had observed, and this is confirmed by some primary sources that I had written shortly after the incident, I had observed, I'll never forget this, fuck. There was blood coming out of every orifice that I could see, right? You need to understand, his ears were bleeding. His eyes had a little bit of blood in them. His nose was bleeding. And the thing that stuck with me most was the mouth. At that time, I was learning good dental hygiene, and there was a product called ACT, A-C-T mouthwash. And the kids' version, you were able to squeeze the bottom it would shoot up through a tube into a little reservoir at the front or at the top that you would get to the fill line. And then when it got to the fill line, you knew that that's how much you took into your mouth, and then you rinsed your mouth with it after you brushed your teeth. But the thing that was significant for me is that I was learning how to gargle properly. So when you would rinse your mouth, you would, at the end of it, you would put your head back and you would gargle, and then you would spit the mouthwash out when you were done. And I knew to gargle properly meant that you had to blow bubbles. And so when I was standing over Zach, the most significant of all of his orifices from which he was bleeding was his mouth. And I saw his mouth was filled up to the teeth with blood. And there were bubbles percolating in that blood, just like he was gargling. And I didn't recognize it at the time, but as an adult, I can understand that he was asphyxiating on his own blood. I imagine he was unconscious after being struck, and your body goes into shock, so hopefully he didn't experience any of that pain. But I remember that very particular. And if you've ever been, I don't know why any of you would have ever been butchers or around massive amounts of blood, but you know that when there are pools of blood in your proximity, it gets into the air and you can taste it, you can smell it. It exists in the air that you're breathing. And it has kind of an irony taste. It's blood. It's very obvious if you've ever been around something like that. And so that was another portion of the memory. And then after that, my memory is a little bit choppy. I remember, like I said, all of the adults had scrambled. I don't know what happened with the kids. I imagined the coaches probably, everyone went off to call 911. The coaches probably took the kids and they brought them away so they didn't have to see what had just unfolded. I wasn't mobile, so again, I was there on my ass next to Zach. And after a short period of time, whoever had called 911, the police had arrived. And I remembered I had never ever in my entire life seen a car jump a curb, right? Drive over a curb. And we were off of the road on like a big grass field. And so I remember it being very significant and sticking in my mind that the police cars, as they came up, they didn't stop on the road like my 5-year-old assumed, my 5-year-old brain would have assumed they would have. They didn't stop on the road, get out and walk over. They just fucking drove up the curb. And so that was another detail that stuck in my head. And I imagine very shortly, I don't quite remember, but the police arrived first, the paramedics arrived later, slightly later. And the paramedics probably assessed both of us. They put me to the side, they addressed Zach immediately, and they got him en route to the hospital. And within the happening of all these things, I imagine my parents came and retrieved me. I don't know if it was my father or my mother. I think it was my father, and he brought me home to my mother. Yes, that's what it was. My father picked me up, he brought me home to my mother. And then I imagine my father left me there and then went to the hospital where Zach was to sort of get updates on these things. And I remember the next most significant memory that I have was approaching my mother in my room. I was able to use my legs at this point, but I was really fucked up. It really hurt, but I wasn't expressing it, and I was still, with adrenaline under shock. And I remembered like limping to my mom. I felt bad, like there was something wrong with me because I was limping because I couldn't walk properly. But I remember limping to my mom, and all my 5-year-old brain could think to say was, Zach got hurt. And that was the next most significant memory that I had. And the next thing I remember, I was on the couch in my living room watching Bob the Builder, because I imagined the adults had a bit of a conversation, conferred with one another, and recognized, the severity of the situation, how significant the injury was. And what do you do with a 5-year-old who doesn't understand what these things are, or what death is, or what a significant injury like this would be? You just try to keep them happy and distracted, and I don't know, bro. I really don't know. I'm not a parent. But I remember being on my mother's lap, and she was very comforting and calm and soft, and she just wanted me to be okay. And I was on her lap on the right side, watching Bob the Builder, pretending to be asleep. I know that she really wanted me to fall asleep, just to not be present, not be cognizant, not be conscious. And I remember she had received a call from my father, and I remembered eavesdropping, trying to listen in and to hear what they were saying. And I don't know the exact words that they said, but my emotional brain put it together after the fact that Zach didn't make it, that he had died. And that they had decided between the two of them to not explicitly tell me that in that moment. Of course, I didn't know what death was. I didn't know what it meant. I didn't understand. I just knew that something wasn't okay, and I had never seen adults freak the fuck out like that. And so it was a big deal. And so I remember, pretending to be asleep, eavesdropping in on that conversation, hearing them make that agreement, and then that was kind of the last memory of that day that I had. Very much later, probably, I don't know, in my 20s or something, I went back and I read several news sources, articles about what had happened that day. It seemed like Zach had died. En route to the hospital, he was resuscitated. And I don't quite know how the body works, but it seems like the resuscitation wasn't enough to keep him alive, and inevitably he failed, and that he died en route to the hospital. But again, I didn't know this in the moment. And then the next most significant memory that I have with this was attending his funeral. And I remember explicitly that I didn't quite understand what had happened. And I didn't know what the funeral meant, but I knew that it was related to Zach, and so I wanted to go. And it was an open casket, right? Thank God it was an open casket. I got to see him one more time. It's very important, right? If anybody ever dies in your life, you need to have the body. Humans need to be able to mourn in that capacity. And I don't quite remember, what was said. I know that everybody, all of the young friends that were my age that played soccer with him, or this, that, and the other, they all got up and they said their sort of thing and whatever. And I didn't know if I was supposed to speak or not. And I don't think that I did not ultimately end up speaking. I was fine. And I remember when everybody was approaching the body, and I don't know what you call it, but like saying the last thing that you say to that person before you bring them to the cemetery and actually bury them. I remembered approaching the body and seeing Zach and being so excited to see him again, because this was the first time that I had seen him since the last time I saw him. And it wasn't until I expressed myself verbally to him and he laid there cold with his eyes closed and his pale skin, and he didn't respond to me. And it was that lack of response tied to the significance of the event, the freaking out of the adults, the bleeding from every orifice on his face, the asphyxiation on the blood, the gargling, just like mouthwash. Somehow my 5-year-old brain put all those things together, and that was my first concept of what death was. It was still confusing because his body was there, but he wasn't. And I didn't know what to make of that. And, I can tell you all the stories of his life and how the funeral went and how his parents responded and all these things. That'll be for a later time. This won't be the last time I tell this story. I'm trying to be concise. I only have so much battery, so please work with me. But I remember we were handed out little, I don't know what you call them, artifacts. There were these puffy white balls of polyester yarn with these sparkly silver streamers embedded within it. And I don't know if this was given at the funeral, but I remember an Adidas sweatband that I had put the ball into, and we were also allowed to assemble Legos as little kids. And those were the things that it wasn't into his casket, right? When they were burying him, the casket was already closed and they were just lowering it into the grave. But when the casket had already been lowered, we assembled Legos sort of while we were out there at the cemetery, and we were allowed to throw them in so that a piece of us would rest with him for the rest of eternity, hopefully. From what I understand, they give you like 40 years or 60 years or something before they dig up the plot and sell it somewhere else. So cemeteries are a very interesting concept. But yeah, I mean, that shit sucked. And that's just from my perspective. I can only imagine what the Tran family had to deal with. And to some extent, I know, right? I know that There was a homicide investigator, and they explored a lot into sort of what happened and how it happened and this, that, and the other. I was investigated. I remember the Officer Feger came to my home and questioned me and all these things. I remember shortly after there were a number of lawsuits that ensued for which my testimony was pertinent. I don't quite know how it worked, but I remember having to provide my recollection maybe a year after the fact, such that they could go to trial, or I don't know the court terms, but so that they could sue the companies responsible. I don't remember if this is the correct number, but I remember 7 as being the number of companies that played some role. The Park District, the manufacturers of the Goal, GLSA, I don't know who else. I really don't remember these things. I was 5 or 6, slightly. I had just turned 6 when I remember the lawsuits came about. And I remember it really sucked, having to deal with the thing, slightly getting over it, and then having to regurgitate in painful detail everything to the court system so that these lawsuits could pursue. But the thing that I remember most was that the Tran family left. They were no longer at that house, and I don't blame them, right? When you lose a son so young, it probably makes sense to leave where you were, to go somewhere else, and to try to start a new life and to try to be happy. I remember there was a Halloween that they were still there. They had just had a new kid, and the kid was dressed up as an M&M. It was just a little baby, maybe an M&M, maybe a Skittle, I don't quite remember. And that was my last recollection of that family, being at that house. And then they moved, and I never saw them again, except for one instance. I mean, 2 instances. I'll tell you about them another time. But the first instance was I was a Cub Scout, and I was selling pancake breakfast tickets, and I went to a particular neighborhood, and I just went down every single house on the street with my father, knocking on every door, trying to sell pancake breakfast tickets. And one of the houses, maybe 15 or 20 houses down the street, was knocked on the door, and who opens the door besides the mother or the father? I don't remember, but I remember being shocked, and I remember them being shocked seeing me. And I can only imagine, right? I don't blame them. I don't hold anything against them, but 2 kids in front of a soccer goal, both playing goalie. The goal falls and hits both of them, but it only minorly injures one, and it kills the other. And I can only imagine that family, not in a negative way, but that they would have thought, why us? Why my son? Why not the other kid? And I don't mean that in a bad way, but like, of course, right? If not me, why not the other person? If not the other person, why not me? It works both ways. And so I can only imagine it must have really sucked for them to see me and to be instantly reminded of the death of their child. And I imagine that that's attributable to the fact that, or rather to the pain that they wouldn't have wanted to see me or be associated with me or have conversations with me or be ongoing with me. So I don't know. I wish them their peace in that. I hope that they have achieved some level of peace. And there are a lot of things I could tell you about this, the grievance counselor, right? Nobody, what the fuck do you do with a 5-year-old who then turned 6, who had witnessed such a graphic and visceral and horrific thing, and who had experienced firsthand the death of their best friend, especially the first friend that they truly had when they moved to a new area, right? It's a very challenging topic. And you don't know what to do, and so you basically do anything that you can to try to provide some amount of something, some comfort to relieve them of stress or anything. I don't know what you do, but I was provided with a grievance counselor, and I remember this was through the church, and she encouraged me to keep a journal, right? When you feel feelings and you don't know what to do about it, or you have information and you don't know how to process it, here's a journal with a blue spine, a yellow cover, like a cream yellow cover, and some blue little floret flowers on a pattern in the front. Bust this thing open, write down whatever you're thinking, feeling, whatever. And like, this is how you process grief. And so that was the mechanism that I was given as a child to metabolize what had occurred to me. And for good or bad, it was the best tool that I had. And yeah, so I'll conclude it there, right? That generally informs you of a lot of the story of the death of Zachary Nam Tran. And I intend to revisit the story in the future, but to incorporate more elements of his life. I had a ton of primary sources, including a story that I had wrote. It must have been the next fucking day that I had written this down, because I had every single detail of the car ride from my house to our friend's house, to the park district, to the field where we played soccer, to what was said in the car. I know that Zach told a joke. I can't repeat it at this very moment, but I will. But Zach told a joke that his mother was drinking water, and she laughed so hard at the joke of a 6-year-old that she spit her water on the windshield, and we had to stop for a moment as she wiped it off on the inside of the car. And just some really beautiful things, right, in the life of him. But this is a story about the death. Oh man, and that shit sucks, and I never knew what to do with it or what it meant, and it affected me in a lot of ways, and it affected the way that I related to people and the way that I loved people, my family, my friends, the relationships, the women that I was with, all of these things as a very young kid. And I never knew quite how to make sense of these things or what it meant until very recently. I would argue, as a matter of fact, this year, that I came across, you could call him a poet, who wrote a particular paragraph addressing the death of a close friend of his that happened, slightly older in his life, maybe teenagers. And in this poem, or this song, whatever you want to call it, I should have pulled up the lyrics ahead of time, but it said something to the extent of, in rhythm and in flow, and with the chorus and the melody and all the particular musical mechanisms of these things. They said, "I never got to say I love you as much as I wanted to, but I do. Yeah, I say it now when you can't hear me. What the fuck good does that do me now? But somehow I know you're near me. Your presence, blah, blah, blah." It goes on, continuing the same rhyme scheme. But to sort of break that down, it's coming from a place of regret from the artist. I never got to say I love you as much as I wanted to, but I do. Right? This is a very human thing. We attribute our love, our affection, whatever word you want to use for it. We care about the people in our lives, and we want to see good things happen to them. We hate it when bad things happen to them. And so that's sort of the first part of it. Then the second part is a self-deprecating, a hatred, because what the fuck good does it do you to express love to somebody that's already dead? They're already gone. They don't exist to receive your affection, right? And so it's kind of coming from a place of regret that this person really loved his friend. But while that friend was living, he didn't have the opportunity to say that he loved him as much as he actually did, which unfortunately is only a lesson you realize in retrospect, after that person is gone. You don't realize what you had until it was gone. You don't know how much you love somebody until they've been taken from you. And that death can come in many ways. It doesn't necessarily have to be a physical death. It can be moving. It can be moving on as you grow older. It can be this, that, and the other. There are many things. And then the third portion of that little rhyme, those bars, is but somehow I know you're near me. So whatever you believe about what happens to the soul, the consciousness, the things beyond the meat that is the body after you die, everything about that person once they're dead, it sounds ridiculous, but it lives uniquely within you, right? Within your memories, within the ways that you interact with those thoughts, within the ways that you recollect, and the fondness with which you view those experiences that you shared with this person, right? That person will live forever within you. And that's a very beautiful thing. And so whether it's, they go to heaven and their soul is looking down on you, or they exist on this plane as sort of a purgatory ghost that sort of hangs around and addresses things until all of their affairs are in order, and then they go on to another place. But whatever it is, that person lives within you and your memories of it. And what this poet is expressing in the song is, what the fuck good does that do me now? But somehow I know you're near me. So I hate myself for the fact that I didn't express that I loved you as much as I did while you were alive. But even though I hate myself, and even though I'm saying that I love you to a person that isn't there or can't receive my love, I still know that you're near me. Whether that be in heaven or on a ghost plane or within yourself. That's a very human thing, right? That person will be near you as long as you keep them alive in your memory. And at the very least, that's the mechanism that I've recognized, and that made a lot of sense for me. And so the whole point of this story, right, is to share this lesson with you. The only thing guaranteed in life is death and taxes. Fuck taxes. Death is assured, right? You are not going to make it out of this alive. Maybe those things will change with AI and all these technologies and blah, 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 but it's almost assured that you will die. And everybody around you that you love and everybody that's ever existed will die. And you know that with certainty. You just don't know the order or the timing, or if they're gonna die first, or if you're gonna die first, or if who's going to die. And so the whole point of this story, the lesson that I want to impart upon you, I don't even know if that's a word, to be quite frank, but the lesson that I want you to take away from this whole story, from my whole spiel, is to tell the people that you love them while they are alive. Alive to hear it, alive to feel it, and alive to reciprocate it to you, because they will be dead soon enough, or you will be dead. And the only thing that's guaranteed is this present moment, as ridiculous and woo-woo, granola, whatever as that sounds. It is the truth, right? All you have and are guaranteed is this very moment. You could be struck down by this tree that's dead, falling and toppling, and who knows, right? But you're guaranteed this moment. And whether, you know, you have the emotional intelligence or the emotional maturity or the emotional experience to express these things verbally, or if it makes you uncomfortable, or if you're raised in a culture where that's not said explicitly, or if it's a toxic thing and you're taught to believe that it's gay to express love from man to man or woman to woman or whatever the fuck it might be, it doesn't matter. Like, it's a very human thing. Whether the word that you want to use is love, or that I care about you, or that you're somebody that's important to me, or that I want good things to happen to you, or that I don't want bad things to happen to you, or that I'm appreciative of you, or that I'm glad that you're around me, or thank you for being here, or it's gratitude, or this or that or the other, whatever it is, express that to the people that you feel that for, that are around you, and allow them the grace to express that to you as they feel it, and give them some leeway with it being uncomfortable or awkward or this or that and the other. Because the worst thing, I assure you, the worst thing out of these two scenarios, saying the thing and being embarrassed or awkward or feeling like you're a little bit gay because the homie didn't reciprocate the love that you have for him, or whatever the fuck it might be, it is far less painful and far easier to deal with a slight moment of discomfort than it is to go the rest of your life like this artist in this poem, in this song, in these bars, to say, I never got the chance to say I love you as much as I wanted to, but I do. Even when you're dead, I still fucking love you, right? So that's the message that I wanted to communicate. That is the point of this story, right? That is, it's not the legacy of Zachary Tran, but that is one of the many lessons and the pieces of wisdom that I was able to take away as a survivor of an experience like that. And so, fuck. It's a horrible thing. I wish it would have never happened. But there is wisdom to be extracted from every experience that a human lives. And I wanted to share that with you. And so this morning, waking up to the text that the homie's mother passed away and that her ceremony, the mass, the funeral procession, the burial were occurring at that very moment, right? Had to wake up, had to throw on the suit, had to get to where I had to go. Just to be there, to support the homie, to express love. Because shit, I know that if I lost a parent, I would I would struggle with dealing with that. And any sort of support, even just a moment, even just a glance, even just the presence without a word spoken. We're human, right? That shit means a lot, and it's very impactful, far more than you would ever recognize until you're in that situation, right? So don't ever discount yourself. Don't have a fucking excuse as to why you can't be there because of work or a tire or plans or travel, whatever the fuck. Just fucking be there for your homies, for your family, for those that you love, for those in your community, whomever you can be there for. I don't know if whom is the proper word to use, but just be there, bro. Just fucking be there, right? And so, I can say that this vlog is dedicated to Zachary named Tran and to the Tran family. I hope you're doing well. I really do wish you the best and the health and the wellness of your family and your kids and all of that. Dedicate this as well to Leticia Rojas, better known as Juan's mom. I mean, to me, as a little kid, a beautiful woman that I would walk, I don't know, a mile or two to get to the homie's crib, to knock on his door at 7 o'clock in the morning over the summer in elementary school to say, hey, is Juan there? And to piss her off and to wake her up, and who welcomed us into her home and allowed us to play video games and be mad and to drink her Kool-Aid jammers that she bought with her hard fucking earned money, just for us to come over and sip her fucking Kool-Aid. And to the family, to Kevin, to Juan, Marty, I love you, dog. Just wanted to express these things, right? So, death is inevitable. It comes for all of us. Use your opportunities while you're alive to express the things that you feel to those that you have while you have them, because otherwise you won't. And if you are fortunate enough to be the one that lives while the rest die, it's pretty probable that you will spend the rest of your life regretting to some extent that you didn't have the opportunity to express yourself as fully as you do. Same mechanism that makes humans, have an argument or be in a confrontation or be embarrassed in a certain way, and then they spend the next 12, 24, 36 hours thinking about the things that they should have said and how they should have said it and how they should have acted and what they should, all this shit. It's the same fucking thing, but it's far more deep, right? We're humans, we need each other, we need community, we grew up in tribes for hundreds of thousands, millions of years, I don't know. I'm not a scientist in that capacity. But we're human, right? We need each other. We've developed these complex technologies of emotions that make us attached and affectionate and more likely to bond and mate and create communities and tribes and be successful. And just because we live in the world in which we live in now, where there's technologies and phones and social media and all this shit, doesn't negate the fact that we are human and we have emotions and that we need to express these things towards one another. So that was the whole point of this, right? I implore you to tell your homies, your family, your friends, your loved ones, your community, your teachers especially, right? Your old teachers are going to die. Fuck, more stories about that in the future, but everybody in your life, right? Tell them that you love them, how you feel, that you care about them, whatever it is, while you have them around, while you're around, because you will die, they will die, death is inevitable. Life is a given in the moment that you're alive, so take advantage of that while you have that. So that's all I've got for you today, but I wanted to thank you, I appreciate you, I love you, I miss you. And I hope that this story was impactful in some capacity, and if it can even get one individual to express how they feel to another individual at a time that they have the opportunity, that's a tremendous success for me. So I appreciate you. If you have any stories, you know, I've got a YouTube channel, so if you have any stories or experiences that you'd like to share, I encourage you put those in the comments. That'd mean a lot. All right. That's all I got. I'll end it there. But thank you again. Appreciate you. Love you. Miss you. And if anybody can tell me where I'm at, that's a floodplain right there. I don't have anything to give you if you win, but the western sun. All right. Peace out.